And welcome back. In the previous video, we did source port address translation. In this video, I'd like to walk you through a few options of implementing source address translation, but this time with a one-to-one mapping between individual hosts on the inside and globally routable addresses on the outside without ever having to overload or pat on a single address. So for our game plan, let's do this. Let's create a pool of addresses and let's go ahead and use 23.1.2. Let's use 101 all the way through 200. And for this pool, we'll specify that instead of doing overload, we'll do one-to-one. And then this pool and this NAT device then can support up to 100 devices who are forwarding traffic that need translations. So it'll just use one address from the pool, make the translation based on the traffic going through it. And if a different device sends traffic through the firewall, it'll choose a different address, associate with that other client, and repeat that process up to 100 times based on this NAT with a one-to-one mapping. So let's go ahead and modify our existing port address translation and change it into a one-to-one mapping here on Firewall 1. So when we left our configuration, we were dealing with centralized source NAT. And because we're still set up there, let's do the centralized source NAT method first, and then we'll fall back and take a look at the other option by implementing the network address translation on the individual security policy entries. So here for central NAT, let's go ahead and just double click on this rule for address translation and let's modify it. So it's still saying for traffic coming in and out on those respective ports, sourced from 10 anything. For network address translation, we're going to use a dynamic pool, but this time we don't want to use the PAT pool, so we'll go ahead and remove that. And then we'll click on create to create a new pool, and we'll say NAT pool. And for here, let's go ahead and specify 23.1.2.101 through 23.1.2.200. I believe that was our plan. Oh, it doesn't like that because the other pool still exists. Let's go ahead and click on cancel here. And let's cancel it just for a moment. And let's go to our pools. So here under IP pools, let's just edit the existing pool here. We'll call it pool for NAT outside. And it's going to be a one-to-one as opposed to overload. And the range is going to be from 101 all the way through 220. This IP range overlaps with existing IP pool range. All right. So I'll cancel that. All right, so this pool is from 111 to 112. Let's go ahead and start the dynamic pool for NAT at 113 all the way up to 200. That way we don't have an overlap. So we'll go ahead and click on Create New. We'll call it NAT pool for outside. It's one-to-one, and the starting address will be 23.1.2. So let's just go 115. That'll be out of the range as well, all the way through 23.1.2.200. All right, that looks great. We'll click on OK. And now let's go back to our central source NAT right here under policies and objects. And let's just modify the existing rule that's currently here that's currently using PAT. So we'll go ahead and double click on it. And instead of using the pool for PAT outside, we'll remove that. And we will select NAT for pool outside. If we hover over it, it'll show us it's a one-to-one mapping. The range is 115 to 200. So we'll go ahead and select it and click on OK. And we're done. So let's do a couple things. Let's go to the command line. And let's clear the existing sessions with diagnose, sys session, and clear. All right, that cleared this session as well. And I'm going to click refresh on each of our 3 virtual machines. So I'll do that on machine 1, machine 2, and machine 3. They've all had a refresh. They all should have sent traffic through the firewall. And we'll do a get system session list and press enter. So let's go ahead and find our 3 amigos. These will do right here. Boom, boom, boom. So there's 161, 254, and 152. And as far as address translation, it should have given each of those source IP addresses its own IP address for the translation. So 161 got 115. Great. 254 got 117 on the outside. And 152 got 116. Again, all 3 unique because we're doing a one-to-one mapping with official network address translation. So we implemented this with centralized source NAT, but we can also do it in the more traditional method on a security policy by security policy entry as well. So let's go ahead and do that right now. We'll go back to System, and under System, we'll go to Settings, and we'll scroll down. And right here under Central SNAT, we'll go ahead and remove that. So we're not doing centralized SNAT, and click on Apply. And now if we go up to Policies and Objects, notice there's no more entry here for centralized SNAT. It doesn't exist. And that's because in this method, we're now going to be using the NAT commands on each and every security policy entry where we want network address translation to happen. So to do that, we'll go back to our firewall policy. Here's our inside to outside. We'll double click to edit that. So this security policy is specifying the permissions for it to go through, and it's also specifying now the network address translation. So if we wanted to use a dynamic pool, we'd go ahead and select dynamic pool, click on the plus symbol, And then we have our NAT pool for outside, which is a one-to-one mapping. We'll select that once again. And with it selected, we'll click on OK. And let's go back to the command line interface, reset all the sessions, generate some traffic, and verify the results. So here at the CLI, we'll do a diagnose sys session and clear. That'll reset all the sessions, including this one. Secure CRT has now reconnected me to the firewall. And let's go ahead and I'll generate some traffic on each of our 3 VMs. So I'm simply going to click on the refresh on the browser for each one of them. And now that I've done that, let's take a look at these sessions. And we'll do that with get system session list. And here are 3 of our devices very neatly tucked together right here. So there's 254, 161, and 152. And once again, they all have unique source addresses after the translation. And that's because in our pool, we're using one-to-one. The difference here is that it's part of the security policy where we're specifying the NAT that's going to be done as opposed to using it in a centralized policy. So up to this point, we've implemented source address translation in several different ways. We've done it with PAT, which is many-to-one, and NAT, which is one-to-one. We've also done it based on security policy entries versus centralized configurations. So we've seen all those options. Now, next, what I'd like to do is tackle the world of destination NAT, where on the initial flow of traffic, instead of swapping out the source IP address, we have good reason to swap out the destination address. And that is, again, on the initial flow of the traffic. So I'll see you in the next video for destination NAT in just a moment. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.